Welcome back to HBCU Game Day and welcome to the Week 11 edition of HBCU Football Friday Night, where we break down the top matchups of the week. I am Simone Stanley. He is a Wilton Jackson. Wilton, how are you feeling headed into Week 11?
I am feeling great. I can't believe it's week 11. I feel like we just started football season like, 2 months ago, and I'm just thinking like we're almost done. Like we got a lot of important games to break down. I mean, it's getting to that part of the season, second week in November. I'm just excited to be here.
It's almost gone, but this is also the best part of the season because there's so many implications this week across every conference. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start with the SWAC. So this weekend, we have Mississippi Valley State University, who is defeated, headed to Jackson State University, taking on a 7-2 red-blue Jackson team. Now, Wilton, explain to the people why we are talking about a defeated Mississippi Valley team headed to Jackson to go be defeated again.
Well, Simone, despite what records say, Mississippi Valley always plays Jackson State hard. And one thing they say about teams that are in-state rivalries, or just rivalries, period, you always throw records out. And so one thing I want to point out, T.C. Taylor and even some of his players often say this whole this phrase like, crushing the net with a sledgehammer is, their mentality to have when they're going up against opponents that they're supposed to overpower. And so in this week, this is the mindset that they have. But again, this is a Delta Devils team that always plays Jackson State at least, tough for the first half. And then after that, this is a team that, in Jackson State that tends to pull away. And so if you're Jackson State, you really want to make sure that you start fast and eliminate any confidence for Mississippi Valley to have throughout this game, specifically in that first half. And, of course, obviously, it starts with Jackson State's rushing attack and then also leading off with Jacoby and Morgan at quarterback. If you're Jackson State, defense must keep the pressure on Mississippi Valley for all 4 quarters. This wouldn't be the game to get laxed. And then also, if you're Jackson State, making sure that you're getting pressure on Mississippi Valley's quarterback, Tajarian Williams. Pretty much when you start talking about the Delta Devils' production on offense, it starts and begins with him. You're talking about a quarterback that can run and also pass the ball, get the ball to his receivers. So if your Jackson State defense needs to be on point. But if you're Mississippi Valley, the keys are simple in terms of them trying to win this game, but I just don't think they have enough firepower to get a win against a really, really red-hot Jackson State team. But for Mississippi Valley, they would have to slow down Jackson State's rushing attack. The O-line would have to consistently get pressure against Morgan. And then also, they would have to not turn the ball over and keep Jackson State out of the red zone. You're talking about the Tigers are the #1 team in red zone offense percentage coming into this game.
All right. So we can pretty much predict what's going to happen in that game. Records, rivalries. Yeah. We'll see. Make sure y'all stay till the end for Wilton's picks. Wilton are you undefeated again?
I am undefeated again.
So Wilton has been undefeated in his picks for 3 weeks. He's going to gas up Mississippi Valley and Bethune-Cookman and make y'all think he's going to pick them, and then we'll see what he really thinks at the end. So stay tuned for his picks. But we have another SWAC. This is the last SWAC matchup of this week that we're going to preview. It is Texas Southern 3-5 headed to Alcorn, who is 4-5, a big SWAC West game. Wilton, what are you seeing when you look at this one?
So before I get into this game, Simone, this was a really pivotal game last year between these two teams. As a matter of fact, Texas Southern has won the last 2 games. But last year, Alcorn was in the driver's seat when they lost this game. But things could be very different this year when the 2 teams meet on Saturday. I think for Alcorn, when you talk about the keys to success for them, will the Braves be able to run the ball against the Tigers' defense? You're talking about an Alcorn team that's led in their rushing attack with quarterback Xavier Vaughn and running back Jacorian Sewell, who literally sit in the top 3 in SWAC rushing yards this season. And so when you think about a Texas Southern team that's not that great in stopping the run, they're 8th in the conference coming into this game, giving up 175.5 yards per game on the ground. I don't see Alcorn having a problem in being able to run the ball against them. I think more than anything, too, while running will be the first choice for Alcorn, Vaughn still would need to make some passes down the field. I say that because more so in the last 2 games for Alcorn, Vaughn, in his production, he's went 23 of 39 and 163 yards and 2 interceptions versus in the previous 4 games for Alcorn, when Alcorn was 3-1, he threw at least 1 touchdown in those games. So if you're Alcorn, you want to make sure that your offensive line is controlling the line of scrimmage and also allowing for him to throw the ball as well as use his legs and make plays down the field. Also, if you're Alcorn defensively, you have to be able to stop the Texas Southern's run and also containing Jace Wilson. You're talking about a quarterback in Jace Wilson who's still kind of getting back into rhythm. Texas Southern has had their issues at quarterback this season. But again, if you give Jace Wilson some time, he can connect with receivers. So if you're Alcorn, you want to make sure that you're limiting his production. If you're Texas Southern, you want to establish the run as fast as you can with Quinton Quinn. You're talking about a guy that's the SWAC's third leading rusher. If Texas Southern wants to win this game at any point, O-line must be able to control the line of scrimmage for them. And not only just for Quinton Quinn, you're talking about a Texas Southern rushing attack that includes Davion Forrest and Xavier Lewis, who's also a threat in special teams as well. So these would be some of the keys for Texas Southern. Obviously, they will have to limit Alcorn's rushing attack and certainly get pressure on Vaughn.
That is going to be one of the biggest matchups to watch in the SWAC. Now we have three other conferences to talk about, so let's go ahead and pivot over to the MEAC, where South Carolina State University, who is 6-2, barking really loud right now, is headed to D.C. to take on Howard University, who is 4-5. We know all these MEAC games mean so much. You drop one, and your season could be over. Wilton, what are you expecting out of this one?
You know, Simone, when I look at this game, if you're Howard, you have to ask yourself the question, can the Bison stop the dual threat capability of quarterback Eric Phoenix? Eric Phoenix, he's not, obviously this is his first time playing for Chennis Berry at South Carolina State, but he's no stranger to Chennis Berry, obviously from his time at Benedict. But you talking about an Eric Phoenix, I've said this several times on the show, though his ability to get the ball to his receivers and extending plays in terms of getting the ball to his receivers, it's just been phenomenal all season. And again, you want to talk about looking at the tape, you know, look at what he did against North Carolina Central, who was considered the best team in the MEAC before obviously South Carolina State beat them. He registered 300 yards passing. He registered his third 300-yard passing performance while picking up his second best rushing performance, 61 yards on 14 carries last week. You're talking about a Howard team that enters this game number 2 in total defense, but fifth in rush offense, number 2 in pass defense. And so if you're Howard, you have to be able to literally get after Phoenix to make sure, number one, that he's not comfortable in the pocket, but then two, also making sure he's not getting along the edges to extend those plays to get the balls to his receivers. Also, another big matchup I'm looking at in this game, specifically when I talk about Howard, is South Carolina State's wide receivers, particularly Caden High and Justin Smith-Brown versus defensive back Kenny Gallup. You're talking about Kenny Gallup is one of the best defensive backs in the country amongst the HBCU ranks. He's the reigning MEAC Defensive Player of the Year, and he's one of the semifinalists for the Aeneas Williams Award, which is the nation's best defensive back in HBCU ranks. I'm willing to bet you that he's going to get tested in this game against those receivers from South Carolina State. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And then also, if you're the Bison, your offensive line must win the battle up front, manage first downs, and consistently convert on third downs to keep South Carolina State's offense on the sideline. Now, if you're South Carolina State, you want to make sure you're playing through Phoenix and you're controlling the trenches. Obviously, Phoenix gets most of the attention, but don't sleep on the fact that South Carolina State's success through Phoenix also is predicated a lot on their rushing attack with DeAndre Duhart, KZ Adams, and Tyler Smith. You're talking about a Bulldogs rushing attack that really allows for Phoenix to open up some passes down the field, or get some passes, complete some passes down the field to his receivers. So I think that if South Carolina State is able to run the ball, I think that bodes well for them. And then also, if you're South Carolina State, don't give up explosive plays to Howard's playmakers. Remain strong on defense, specifically on third downs, and protect the end zone. Howard has dynamic playmakers in Jared Hunter and Eden James, their running backs, and then also 2 senior-led wide receivers in Casey Hawthorne and Isaiah Williams. Best to believe, if you're Howard, Howard's going to try to, obviously get their playmakers into this game and obviously capitalize on explosive plays if they're there. If you're South Carolina State, you want to make sure that you limit those.
All right, the MEAC is going to be spicy. Howard trying to defend their MEAC title, trying to make another trip to the Celebration Bowl. But we know how hard that is, especially with these other teams really showing themselves so far in the MEAC. Now let's take it over to Division II, starting with the we're starting with the SIAC. Albany State 5-4, going to Fort Valley State University, who is 6-3 right now. This game means so much because the SIAC championship game, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, and Fort Valley State controls their destiny right now, but it could go either way depending on this game against Albany State. Wilton, what are you looking at when you see this matchup?
So when I look at this matchup now, I'm not going to give my pick away, but I'm just going to give a note before I get into it.
So you're going to give it away?
I'm not, actually. You'll be surprised. I'm just going to leave it at that. Fort Valley has lost 8 of the last 10 contests in this series. I'm just
So you're picking
that.
Albany. Come on.
I'm,
You have
I'm,
no
you will see,
illusion or nothing.
you will see the pick at the end. You might be pleasantly surprised. That's all I'm saying.
I think he's gonna pick Albany, y'all. Come on.
We will see about that.
Because one thing you've shown on this show, you love a streak and you love some past history. You love that. Like, so I already know you pick Albany, but go ahead.
We will see. You'll see. We'll see in a few minutes. So if you're talking about Fort Valley State, the question you have to ask yourself, can the Wildcats slow down Isaiah Knowles and the Golden Rams offense? Albany State offense has scored the most touchdowns in the SIAC this season and relies more heavily on this passing game behind the play of Knowles, who leads the league in touchdown passes and ranks second in passing yards this season. However, Fort Valley State's greatest strength defensively is stopping the run, and also they're also able to limit the production in the air. But if you're Fort Valley State, luckily the good thing for you is Fort Valley has been able to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks as they lead the league in total sacks gained this season with 36. And so those are two of the bigger reasons that I think that obviously Fort Valley has to ask itself. But then too, Simone, one thing that came into question when looking at the schedules for these teams, especially with Albany State, the Rams have struggled to get wins against some of the D2's best teams this year. They lost to Valdosta State, they lost to Shaw, they lost to Miles, and they lost to Savannah State. Of course, they got wins against Central State, Kentucky State, Allen, Morehouse, Edward Waters, which was obviously very similar to Fort Valley. However, a win against a Fort Valley team for Albany State would really bode well for them. And I just think that it would kind of change the trajectory on some things. And then I think, too, the Wildcats must win the battle in the trenches against Albany State's defensive line. And if you are looking at defensively for Fort Valley State, you must get Knowles and company off the field in third down situations. You're talking about a Golden Rams offense that when they're clicking on all cylinders, it's hard to get them off the field and slow them down. I think if you're Albany State, Isaiah Knowles, you must have the game of your life. You must have a strong game, obviously getting the ball to his wide receivers. Some of his favorite targets would be Jamil Williams, Javion Jackson, and Devon Dorsey. Obviously, a consistent dose on the ground for running back Tiant Weish, would help as well. If you're Albany State, you want to limit Kelvin Durham and Brandon Marshall's impact in this game. Obviously, Brandon Marshall, we know what he can do on the ground, but don't forget that he can also come out the backfield, catching the ball out of the backfield with that. And then also, if you're Albany State, make sure you take advantage of special team plays while limiting Fort Valley special teams opportunities as well. You're talking about for Fort Valley, they have someone by the name of DeJuan Bell who has 3 touchdowns on punt returns this year. So if you're Albany State, you don't want to kick it to him, and you want to make sure if you, by mistake, kick it to him, that you contain him from having a strong impact on special teams.
Okay, so you say all that just to pick. I'm just kidding. We'll see. We'll see who Wilton picks at the end. We're going to see who Wilton picks after one more matchup. We are covering all the conferences today. Nobody can complain. I don't want to hear a CIAA person say, where's CIAA? I don't want to hear an SIAC person ask for that. I don't want to hear SWAC me at. We covered all the conferences. We have the CIAA, Virginia Union, who is 7-2 right now, going to Virginia State, an in-state battle. So you know Wilton's going to love the rivalry. He's going to love the proximity. He's going to love the history. He's going to love all that. But what else do you see when you look at this one?
Simone, I'm really excited about this game. You're talking about 2 coaches that are obviously outstanding in leading their programs, Alvin Parker and Henry Frazier, the legendary Henry Frazier. But I think when you look at this game, and of course the winner of this game gets a chance to play in the CIAA championship game. If you're Virginia Union, you have to be able to establish the running game with Jada Byers to open up what will need to be a strong performance from quarterback Mark Wright. Byers, obviously CIAA's leading rusher, has registered more than 1,300 yards on the ground this season and has notched 6 contests of more than 100 yards, which includes a game against Hampton. However, against CIAA's elite teams like Johnson C. Smith and Winston-Salem State, Byers was held to less than 50 yards in both of those contests. So you might be wondering why I said that last part of having a strong passing performance from Mark Wright, because Byers may not, I'm not saying he will or that he won't, but he may not have that same running success that he's had against other teams. So with that requires Mark Wright to have a pretty phenomenal game, which he's good in his own right as well. And also, they have some receivers that are pretty solid as well. One of them being Reginald Vick. He's a key playmaker for the Panthers in their wide receiver room. And I think also for the Panthers, the offensive line must continue to own the line of scrimmage and take advantage of all red zone scoring opportunities. Virginia Union has only allowed 3 sacks this season. Virginia Union is also winning the battle in the trenches, must win the battle in the trenches to allow for a balanced attack on offense to set up some of these scoring opportunities once they're able to move the ball down the field. And I think if you're Virginia Union, you want to make sure you get pressure on Trojans quarterback Romello Williams and not allowing him to get comfortable. So, if you know, when I think about this Virginia Union defense, a couple players come to mind when I think about them being able to get pressure on Romello Williams. I'm talking about linebacker Shamar Graham, defensive lineman Isaac Anderson, and some of the members of their secondary, and William Davis and Donald Gatling. I'm expecting them to make some critical plays for Virginia Union in this game if they expect to win. If you're Virginia State, Trojan offense must go through Romello Williams. Romello Williams has shown us time and time again that he's one of the more proficient passers in the conference. He's second in completion percentage. He's thrown for 2 or more touchdowns in 6 of the Trojans' 9 games this season, and he's a big part of their offense. And honestly, Simone, he has to have a phenomenal game for Virginia State to win this game. Also, if you're Virginia State, can the Trojans win the battle up front to allow Jamil Williams to run the ball? You're talking about a Virginia Union defense that's stout, really, really stout. So being able, if Virginia State can find a way to establish the run with Williams, it would bode well for them. However, when I look at Williams, or I look at Jamil's numbers on the ground against some of the CIAA's elite teams like Winston-Salem State, Fayetteville State, Johnson C. Smith, he failed to rush for 100 yards. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. And then also, if you're Virginia State, be ready to limit the ground production from Jada Byers. I think that goes without saying, as well as limiting their opportunities on 3rd and 4th downs and in the red zone.
We are at the best segment of the show, Wilton's Week 11 picks. Wilton is undefeated for the past 3 weeks since he's been making picks. So let's see who he has this week. No surprise, Jackson State University. See, Mississippi Valley State fans, see how he do. He give y'all life for 5 minutes, make y'all think y'all got a chance. Against Jackson, it still picks Jackson State. He has Alcorn State. He has South Carolina getting a win over Howard. Fort Valley, wow. Okay, so he has Fort Valley breaking that streak, and then he has Virginia Union getting a win. It's going to be interesting. The outside of Jackson State, 2 through 5 could go either way this week.
It could. Like I said, I really will have my eye on that Virginia State-Virginia Union game, and especially that Albany State game. I'm really intrigued by what happens in those, and I'm just excited to see, because I think we're in for some really, really good championship games down the stretch, and really just some outstanding football within the SWAC and even in the MEAC. I mean, because you're just really getting into MEAC play now, you know, a week after Halloween. So it's just an exciting time for college football, specifically amongst the HBCU ranks.
All right, that is the Week 11 edition of HBCU Football Friday night right here on HBCU Game Day. Until next week, I am Simone Stanley. He is Wilton Jackson. See you guys later.